Coming up, a book at bedtime. Alan Hutchison reads another extract from a series of bedside books.
What books will you read this summer to make you think?
The sunset. The sunset. What was. The sunset was dying over the hills.
Summer is the time for many fun things. Catching up on the garden, heading to the beach, exotic vacations in foreign lands. But the best thing about summer? Catching up on books you've always meant to read.
The end.
It's a philosophical summer reading list. Coming up on Philosophy Talk. What books should thoughtful people like you read this summer? Welcome to Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything, well, except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor. I'm here at the studios of KALW San Francisco. My colleague John Perry is taking a well-deserved summer break. Today, it's our annual summer reading show. Now, I'm going to spend most of my summer, I have to admit, not reading, but writing. I've got a big book to finish. But with your help, we're going to put together a list of deep reading that you and others might want to dig into, and I might join you too if I find some extra time. I'm also going to talk to a couple of special guests with recommendations of their own. Among them, our film critic, Leslie Francis. Leslie has been really gripped by the new TV series, The Handmaid's Tale, based on Margaret Atwood's novel of the same title, and she's got lots of thoughts about film, fiction, and novels, and she'll join us later in the show. Our roving philosophical reporter, Holly McDede, has been starting her summer reading by going back to the source of one of this summer's most successful blockbusters, Wonder Woman. Now, Wonder Woman is the first female-driven superhero movie to hit theaters since, 2004 when there was Catwoman, and 2005 when there was Elektra. And before it became a blockbuster movie, though, Wonder Woman was a very successful comic book, aka graphic novel, and it contains lots of deep thoughts about women and truth. Holly files this report.
When Wonder Woman hit the theaters this summer, some movie critics were like, "Merciful Minerva, finally, proof a female superhero can own the box office." Here's Wonder Woman fighting a villainous German soldier.
As magnificent as you are still no match for me.
We'll see about that.
And here she is, encountering and resisting gender norms.
Etta Candy. I'm Steve Trevor's secretary.
What is a secretary?
I go where he tells me to go and I do what he tells me to do.
Oh, well, where I'm from, that's called slavery.
I really like her.
Other movie critics were like, "Aphrodite aid me, this scantily clad woman is not my feminist icon." But if you want to understand the evolution of feminism, the Wonder Woman comics are actually a good place to start.
There's always been this interesting tension of how do you deal with Wonder Woman as a feminist icon.
Jacob Held edited the new book, Wonder Woman and Philosophy, The Amazon Mystique. Since her first comic book appearance in 1941, Held says, Wonder Woman has always been a complicated symbol of feminism.
Especially when you start looking at runs that really hypersexualize her. And then you start going, okay, now is this just Superman for adolescents who don't have the courage to buy Playboy? Why does she have to be in that outfit? That outfit is clearly not battle-tested, battle-worthy. Batman gets armor. She gets a thong.
But hey, womanhood is complicated, and philosophy knows it. Different chapters in Held's book explore the ideas of French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir through the evolution of Wonder Woman. In The Second Sex, for instance, de Beauvoir writes that women, like Wonder Woman, are torn.
Kind of pulled in two directions. Either try and be an authentic self and end up struggling continuously against these norms that are imposed, or accept the norms and try and, maximize your position within them, but recognize that you're always constrained by the norms.
As de Beauvoir writes, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. Superwomen are similar. Valerie Estelle Frankel writes about Wonder Woman's creation in her book, Empowered, The Symbolism, Feminism, and Superheroism of Wonder Woman. She says William Moulton Marston, a Harvard-educated psychologist, wrote his Wonder Woman comics in order to unleash his own ideas about gender identity.
Women are just... All right, this is Marston, not me. Women are just supposed to be so charming and alluring that when men meet them, they decide that they want to be this obedient, peace-loving kind of man, and so they create a better, more peaceful world.
This was during World War II. Marston thought there was too much blood-curdling masculinity in comic books and in the world. He had this theory that women's loving kindness led to submission, and it showed in his Wonder Woman comics.
There was an awful lot of bondage.
But even if Marston created a fetish, he also created an icon, a fully empowered female superhero. She was a woman
who, in fact, was an inventor, who built the invisible plane, who could do sports and horseback trick riding, who didn't have so much divine gifts as she practiced really hard to be able to bounce bullets off her bracelets.
But it didn't last. When Marston died, the bondage imagery went away, and so did the feminism.
The 50s had a new message, which was, okay, the men are back from the war and they'd like their jobs back. Women, could you please put on a knee-length poofy skirt, go back in the house, mop the floor in high heels with a loving expression on your face. We need wives and mothers. We no longer want superheroines.
It wasn't until the 70s that political organizer Gloria Steinem came to the rescue. Steinem founded Ms. Magazine, and its first headline read, Wonder Woman for President. Suddenly, Wonder Woman had her superpowers back. The Wonder Woman TV series, starring Linda Carter in her star-spangled outfit, soon followed.
You again. You're the real Wonder Woman.
Don't make me prove it.
Since then, Wonder Woman as a comic book character has kept her superpowers and feminist philosophy. When philosophy professor Jacob Held saw Wonder Woman on the big screen, he thought about the human condition and got a little existential.
If Wonder Woman was fighting Ares down the street, you go, oh, and what do I do all day? I go to work and teach philosophy. She's fighting Ares.
Praise the all-wise Athena. Wonder Woman, the philosophy, and the original feminist superhero is back. Without the bondage. For Philosophy Talk, I'm Holly J. McDede.
Thanks, Holly, for that amazing report. I'm Ken Taylor, and today we're compiling our annual philosophical summer reading list. Now, I've got plenty to write this summer, but I thought I'd ask some of my more literary friends for a couple of more creative suggestions in case I get some spare time to read some other things. So I'm joined now by my good friend and a good friend of the show, Josh Landy. Josh teaches comparative literature at Stanford University and also co-directs the Literature and Philosophy Initiative. Josh, welcome back to Philosophy Talk.
Thanks, Ken. It's great to be back.
So what do you think people should read this summer? What's on your must-read list or should-read list?
You know, I think people, if they haven't already, should read a book that you know very well, since you and I have taught it together on a number of occasions. It's Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon.
Somebody who hasn't read any Morrison or other Morrison, why should they read Song of Solomon?
Look, this is just one of the great American novels. I mean, I actually personally think of it as the great American novel.
Really?
It combines everything you would want in a piece of fiction.
Tell me what would you want in a piece of fiction?
It's got a great story. It's got powerful characters. It's got extremely important questions about life that everyone should care about, and they're gripping. They make you think. They make you feel. She has this great line that she said in one of her interviews. She said, I don't want to give my readers something to swallow. I want to give them something to feel and think about. Yeah. And this novel does that.
Yeah, it's an amazing novel. I agree with you. It's an amazing novel. What would you say the story is about? I would say it's about so many things.
It is.
It's about broken dreams. It's about coming of age. It's about self-ownership. It's all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. So it's, at the surface level, it's a coming-of-age story. A young African-American man coming of age in Michigan. Milkman Dead.
God, what a strange name, Milk. And it's also about names.
It's about names.
Yeah.
It's about race. It's about the importance of history to identity. It's about the relationship between self and other.
It's about friendship. It's about community.
Yeah.
Right. It's about freedom.
I mean, it's an extraordinary moment when McDede, one of the characters in the novel, a man who comes from a history of slavery, talks about owning other people as something that's good.
Right.
And you think, well, maybe that makes a certain kind of sense within his logic, and yet that can't be Morrison's position. She's presenting things for us to feel and think about.
I want to get up to 10 or 15, maybe 30,000 feet for a second. And I want you to describe the overall structure of the Song of Solomon, because I know you're a student of genres and stuff like that, and different kinds of narrative structures. And it seems to me that this novel has like every narrative structure in a way, and it's many things at once. Yeah. But you may think that's a recipe for incoherence, but it's a recipe for very deep exploration.
Absolutely. So. This is one of the key things. I mean, it's unlike more or less any other novel I know, precisely in what you say, in the fact that it deploys multiple genres. It's not just one story. In a sense, it's 4 or 5 stories. So in part, it's a coming-of-age story, or those Germans would call a Bildungsroman, a novel of education. But in part, it's a quest narrative, and in part, it's a detective story, and in part, it's maybe has tragic elements, and in part, it's a picaresque, which is a story of an individual just trying to get by and experiencing different episodes which challenge their basic capacity for survival.
And I think the deep thing in that makes her to do that isn't just because she likes to play around with genres and this, that, and the other thing, although there is a kind of playfulness to it, and she's a master at it. It's also because she's thinking hard about what a self is, and these are different ways that a self could be configured, because the central character, Milkman Dead, starts out as a person in whom things just happen. There are no organizing commitments. There are no organizing values, right? A bunch of stuff just happens, and he's just kind of, and it's so interesting because a bunch of stuff just happens kind of in him and to him, and all this stuff is happening in the world, and he's not a part of any of it. So right. He's just like, there's the passing show. So how would you narrate a person like that? Through this structure of a picaresque, as you say. But then something happens that sets him off on a quest. It's ostensibly a quest for gold, right? But it's really a quest for another kind of self, right? Exactly. And it takes him onto a journey to his ancestral roots and all this stuff, and through all these other adventures. And so
don't give too much away, Ken.
Yeah. But so the structure of it isn't just about how to tell a story, but it's about, what a self is.
That's exactly right. I totally agree with you. I mean, because, many people have thought that selfhood consists at least partly in the story. I am what's happened to me, or I'm the way I think about what's happened to me. I'm the way I tell the story of my life. I think there's something really compelling about that. But then Morrison asks a further question: what kind of story? Right? Yes, sure. By all means, think of yourself as a story, not just from birth to death, but even from before your birth until after your death. But what shape should that story take? Because the shape really matters. Every story shape implicitly contains a value. What's really important.
And the one character who knows what's really important from the beginning, but it is in some ways, she's illiterate, right? And she seems to, Morrison describes this character as having the mentality of a 3-year-old at times, but she asks the fundamental question that every human being ought to ask. Who am I? What is my life for? What matters most to me? And I love this passage in which she describes how her mind wanders through these crooked pathways and all this sort of stuff but she asks this question.
Exactly.
Right? And that shows that's not just a question for highfalutin philosophers, or highfalutin literary theorists. That's a question for you and for me. So
absolutely. I think that's one of there's so many beautiful things in this novel. One of the beautiful things is that this question about how we should think about our lives, how we should tell our stories, you're right. It's not just for highfalutin people. It's not just a first world problem. This is depicted in the novel as something that is available to everybody and important to everybody. That here's somebody, this character, Pilot Dead in Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, here's somebody who's suffered a great deal in her life.
Yeah.
And she uses the power of narrative to transform her situation.
Josh, one of my great regrets about how the academic world has become is that there used to be this thing when I was a young man, because I went to Notre Dame and I studied the great books, the canon, and all that sort of stuff, right? And there came a time in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s where, especially people from your side of the world, the literary world, but other people too, people in feminist studies and African-American studies and all that sort of stuff, came to see the canon as like this instrument of corruption and exclusion, and they said, down with the canon. And in some ways they had a point. Because in the old days, in the old great books curriculum, you would not have found W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folks.
Right.
But I think that's one of the great works of American letters. And you probably would not have found, in those days, Toni Morrison's The Song of Solomon as part of the canon. If we were to bring back the canon, though, this work would have a place in it, right?
Oh my God, absolutely.
It would be a broader, more inclusive canon.
Right.
But there are works like Morrison's The Song of Solomon that any thoughtful, literate person should perhaps encounter in their lives in the course of their education, because it starts a conversation about the most fundamental things. And it starts a conversation about the most fundamental things that opens up all these other things. So I would love this book not just to be thought of as not just fun summer reading, right? It would be fun summer reading. It's a great novel. It's a great read. But I think it's a novel that any reflective, thinking person should read. It should be like, oh yeah, you should read Hamlet? Of course you should read Hamlet, right? Even in the 21st century, you should read Hamlet. You should read Du Bois. You should read Jefferson. You should read Mill. And you should read Toni Morrison.
Yeah, everyone should read this novel.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. Today, we're putting together our annual summer reading list. Coming up, our film blogger Leslie Francis has been watching the recent TV adaptation of The Handmaid's Tale. She'll join us to talk about how a literary classic fares when it's adapted for a viewing audience.
That sounds like a fun conversation. You mind if I stick around and join you?
Do I mind? It would be cool, Josh. The journey from book to screen when Philosophy Talk continues. Welcome back to the program. It's the Summer Reading List edition of Philosophy Talk. I'm Ken Taylor.
And I'm Josh Landy, sitting in with Ken to help him think about thought-provoking books that philosophically minded folk might read this summer.
We're joined now by Leslie Francis. She's a professor of philosophy from the University of Utah. She's also our in-house film critic. She blogs at Philosopher's Corner under the nom de guerre, Francis on Film. Leslie, glad to have another chance to chat with you.
Great to be here, Ken.
So what do you got lined up for the summer?
Well, so I've been watching The Handmaid's Tale, and I've also decided that because I'm watching it, I'm going to go back and reread it.
That is a fantastic book. How is it on reread?
Better. I liked it a lot the first time. I think the reason it's even better is I missed the subtlety with which Atwood portrays the ways in which democracy can erode. I'd really read it as a woman's novel because many years ago when I was pregnant with my first kid, when I was giving birth, I actually read An Edible Woman, which was one of Atwood's first novels, and a terrific novel, by the way, when I was in the hospital recovering from a cesarean section. So Atwood's been a favorite of mine for a long time, but I'd read her more for thinking about women's issues than for thinking about politics more generally. And on rereading and on thinking about what's going on not only in the U.S. but elsewhere, what it challenges us to think about is how things that are really seriously repressive, we might start to regard as appropriately protecting us from others.
Right.
Or from our own worst selves.
So, well, maybe we could ask you, for people who haven't read the novel or watched the TV show, can you tell us a little bit about it? Just give a quick synopsis.
So the heroine is Offred. Before the crisis, she was married and the mother of a young child, and there was some sort of unidentified ecological crisis which had resulted in very high rates of infertility. So women were removed from the workplace. Those who were fertile, like the heroine Offred, became handmaids to commanders, men who were rich enough to command a handmaid to serve as a surrogate if he could get her pregnant for his infertile wife. So it's a society of enormous moralistic, overtly Christian repression and the use of women as childbearing vessels.
The remaining fertile women, as
the remaining fertile women, yes.
And you, Handmaid 8967, your existence is an abomination. True justice would see you sent to an eternity of suffering. But God has seen fit to make you fruitful, and by that we are bound. Handmaid 8967, you are sentenced to redemption. Sentences will be carried out immediately.
So this is a pretty bleak world, pretty oppressive world. I remember people comparing it when the novel came out as a kind of feminist version of 1984, right? Because it's a very dark, oppressive world, and this kind of religious theocracy, and how it all comes about is a little vague, as I recall.
It is a little vague. It's vaguer in the novel than it's actually made in the made-for-TV miniseries.
One of the things I remember about the novel is written kind of James Joyce style. It's a kind of stream of consciousness. It's all in Offred's. We see the entire world through her stream of conscious thought, and her thought goes all over the place. It's all over the place, from the past to the present to all kinds of things. That kind of thing is really hard to pull off in a movie or a television miniseries.
Well, the made-for-TV miniseries, actually, it starts out with their effort to escape. That's how it has to have some way to pull you in as a viewer, and that's how it pulls you in. It's a heart-wrenching scene. You don't get to that until much, or you don't get to the recollections of that until much later in the novel. The miniseries does do very effectively, I think, flashbacks at various points throughout, and it also manages to have Offred convey her thinking in a way that I was surprised it was able to do, because so much of the novel is, of course, her stream of consciousness.
Right, and that's a common thought about the difference between prose and the visual arts, that what you can do powerfully on TV or in the cinema is give you some kind of strong visual effect, a big vista, or a close-up of a face in pain, for example. Whereas on the page, what you can get is some real nuances of emotion and the kind of stuff that Ken was talking about, this stream of consciousness. How's the adaptation handling that sort of
She does it as though she's talking to herself. So you actually hear her speaking as you're seeing scenes that they could be almost Leni Riefenstahl scene. I mean, they're not crowd scenes in the same way, but they're cinematography of angles and people walking in a kind of magisterial way with what's essentially a voiceover.
The knock is prescribed, because tonight this room is her domain.
Come in.
It's a little thing, but in this house, little things mean everything.
So that's, I think, whoever decided to make this into a filmic thing realized that if you just lost the stream of consciousness element of this novel, it would not be this novel. Even if you told the same tale, they realized that. And so it seems to me like they're trying to get this, seeing the world through her mind. She narrates a lot of it, but then it burst out into a scene, sometimes a large scene, sometimes a very intimate scene, so we're kind of hearing into her thoughts. But then, unlike the novel, although she's the narrator, as it were, we're just seeing the world.
So you'll step outside of her.
You step outside of her. So it's very different. I mean, I kind of wondered why somebody would try to make a filmic thing out of this novel, partly for that reason. And I kind of wondered why they would make it now, since, even though we've got Trump, they must have started this before the age of Trump. Why weren't people making this before that? Why
Yeah.
But I do think it really is a challenge to turn a book like that into a movie.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. It's our summer reading special, and we're talking with Leslie Francis, our film blogger at Philosopher's Corner.
Okay, so I want to broaden this. I want to ask some philosophical. I mean, Margaret Atwood is a very powerful writer. But what philosophical? I mean, is this just interesting literature, interesting social commentary?
And politically, right.
And
clearly political.
Yeah, political. But what's the philosophical meat of this story of The Handmaid's Tale?
What's philosophical about the novel? Well, I think one thing that is very philosophical is, what is it to do something voluntarily? And what counts as coercion? So when she's fired from her job, she doesn't choose to leave her job. But when she decides not to take the physician's sperm, thereby risking herself, or when she decides to allow herself to be a handmaid,
right,
rather than rebelling in various ways that could get her sent to the colonies.
There is a resistance in this novel.
Yes. So what counts as coercion? What counts as voluntary action? I also think the novel raises some very interesting questions about what sorts of interventions in childbirth and reproduction are problematic, and if so, why?
Yeah. I want to take you up on that first one a little bit, because it reminds me of... so I've also watched another only available through an online service series, The Man in the High Castle. I never read the original.
Philip K. Dick?
Yeah, Philip K. Dick. I haven't read the novella from which it comes, but I kind of want to, because it raises the same thing, because it's about a kind of world in which the Nazis and the Japanese win World War II, and set in America, right? And there's all these people coping with the Nazis and the Japanese imperialist and all this stuff, and it's about the same thing you just said, that part of is what's going on in The Handmaid's Tale. It's about so we Americans think of ourselves as very virtuous, but suppose we were the losers and there were this occupying army. Would we accommodate? Would we resist? I mean, most ordinary people just want to get on with their lives. They adjust to the circumstances around them. The possibilities for resistance, they have to kind of be brought to through very traumatic events. And most of the people aren't ever brought to these possibilities. They just accommodate. They get along. They make their choices. They don't reject the frame that is given to them for making those choices. So it sounds like you think some of those same issues, but more issues than that, are going on in Handmaid's Tale.
Yes, I think those issues are actually raised in two different ways. One is the way in which people acquiesced without even quite realizing what they were doing in the takeover. And the other is the whole set of questions of what is your level of responsibility, what is complicity, and what is something that you, in fact, choose to do when you're in situations that are horribly coercive.
So is this, for example, something that Simone de Beauvoir was thinking about and trying to untangle these complicated relationships between freedom and coercion, like where we're constrained, where we're not, where we have the space to stand up and resist,
and at what cost? So some of what she thinks about is it okay to have a kid in these circumstances? You know, she wants to have a kid,
but by having a child, she's in a sense collaborating with the regime.
Yeah.
In the world of this novel, do you think that the ethos is one in which we're supposed to feel that the characters can't really be blamed for going along to get along because it's such an oppressive society? Or are we supposed to feel that there's something cowardly if they do that, and true heroism would require them to stand up and fight back?
I'm not actually sure that I would put it as a matter of heroism or blame. I would put it as a matter of, is she dehumanizing herself? Or is she trying to salvage what little bit of caring and loving, and what would it mean to even salvage that in a situation in which sex is so perverted?
So that suggests that, in fact, this is a fictional world in which one and the same action can actually have two very different characterizations. So depending on the description under which you understand the action, it could actually look really different. It could the very same choice could look like something that we endorse, or it could look like something we disendorse.
Yeah. One other thing that I think is, this isn't a movie. It's a series of episodes. So another thing that when you do a made-for-TV series like this, you have to have something that gives each episode a shape. So you have to have something at the beginning that kind of sucks the viewer in. You have to have some kind of crisis at the end that leads them to want to watch the next episode. And then you have to have some kind of a theme that pulls everything together.
Right.
So it's almost more like Charles Dickens writing a novel.
That's true.
Because he had to write it chapter by chapter, so you'd buy the next issue of the magazine that it was appearing in.
That's true, and you're right, it's different from a movie. But I think television, because I think the TV executives have finally realized something, and then the advent of binge watching and DVRs and all that stuff have freed, because it used to be not only did you have to have that kind of structure that you talked about in an episodic TV show, but you had to make each episode kind of independent of every other episode. Then something happened, because I used to be a fan of Buffy the Vampire, and they railed against this. Josh Whedon railed against this because he wanted to tell a story, and they said, look, you can tell a kind of a story, you can have a big bad, and it can all be leading up to but each episode has to be such that we want a new. It has to be able to stand alone, right? Mm-hmm. So you can't have too many references back and blah blah blah. And TV somehow got over that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think getting over that has freed story making on television to become a distinctive art, different from movies, different from novels, partaking a little bit of the novel. And I love your comparison to the old serialized novels like Dickens, right? Because it can tell these grand. I mean, otherwise you could never have had Game of Thrones on television or Breaking Bad, which I think is one of the greatest stories ever told by a human being.
Or The Wire.
Yeah. Right.
Much less could you get them into the Venice Film Festival.
Good point.
Good point.
We're going to have to draw this to a close. Yeah. So thank you so much, Leslie, for being on Philosophy Talk.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
And we'll look forward to talking to you about movies sometime this summer, okay?
Okay. I will be ready for it.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. It's our annual summer reading show.
This is a lot of fun, Ken. Hey, you mind if I stick around a bit longer and take some calls with you?
That would be awesome, Josh.
Awesome. Okay. More summer reading picks from you, our listeners, when Philosophy Talk continues.
Welcome back. We're compiling our annual summer reading list for thinking folks like you. I'm Ken Taylor. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything
except your intelligence. I'm Josh Landy, and it looks like we've got some callers on the line. Anna in Oxford, England. Welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And tell us what book you have in mind for us for summer reading.
The book I have in mind is a collection of essays called The Hall of Uselessness by Simon Leys.
And who is this Simon Leys person?
This Simon Leys person is a man I knew nothing about a couple months ago. His actual name is Pierre Ryckmans. So Simon Leys is his pen name, and he was a Belgian scholar of classical Chinese art and literature who taught for a very long time in Australia.
Interesting.
Wow. So tell us about this book, this collection of essays.
Well, the book, it's divided into 5 different sections, and they're all or 5 or 6. They're on very different topics. Most of it is dedicated to China because he is a Chinese scholar, and that's his greatest passion. But he also has a section on the university and his views on being a professor for many years. He has another section on the sea. He loves the sea voyage novels and the ocean in general. He has a section on quixotism. I don't know how to pronounce that word.
Yeah, I think, yes. In Oxford, I think they say quixotism because, we Brits pride ourselves on mispronouncing everything.
Okay, there you go. And the legacy of Cervantes. He has a section on just literature in general, which is mostly French literature because his first language is French, so I think he's most well read in French literature. And they're all just very the prose is so good, but beyond that, the ideas are they're not very conventional. I don't think I've come across a thinker like him, so well read and original, and it just seems like he's given so much thought to everything.
I wanted to ask you about a couple other aspects of this book, Simon Leys' book, The Hall of Uselessness. First of all, about the title, I think that's potentially an interesting philosophical question. Is there a use of uselessness? And then maybe if you have time and thoughts, whether you have any thoughts about the Confucius part.
Yeah, I do think his book opens with the title is from it's a quote, a Chuangzi quote that goes, "Everyone knows the usefulness of what is useful, but few know the usefulness of what is useless."
Right.
And I do think that a lot of his essays engage with ideas sort of like procrastination or boredom and idleness and reading and these activities that I think at least in today's society are not seen in a very with a good light. And
that's fascinating. So he thinks that actually procrastination, for example, can be a good thing. There can be there's a value to procrastination.
Just like John Perry.
Exactly.
Yeah, he does, and he sees them as moments when creativity is sort of in a gestation period, and uses really good examples from literature specifically to show how other writers have used that to his advantage. I think the essay he has on the French writer André Gide, who was a notorious just not good for nothing, but had a lot of leisure time and would travel and fill his journals with social events and conversations that he would have with friends. But he always had a lot of money and didn't ever have a quote unquote real job. And in that essay specifically, I can remember Simon Leys really has excellent points on how those moments of not doing anything were actually quite fulfilling and then paved the way for excellent work, written work.
This is fascinating. So the book, again, is Simon Leys, The Hall of Uselessness. Anna, thank you so much once again, and enjoy your time in Oxford. Make sure to get on a punt. That's really important. Eat strawberries and cream. Do the thing.
Thank you for having me.
Let's hear from another one of our listeners. Rory in San Francisco. Hey, welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Thank you.
So what do you want to recommend to us for summer reading?
The book is The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes. And it's all about the process of memory as you get older, looking back on your life. The central character is remembering episodes from his adolescence, 40 years earlier, and recalling incidents that happened with a schoolmate and why it went wrong. And then later in life, it's all revealed to him exactly why it went wrong, and it was completely different than his memory.
So Julian Barnes is a great writer, but I want you to convince our audience that who are looking for philosophical summer reading, that this should be high on their list?
Well, it has a lot to do with the power of memory and what we choose to remember and how we remember it. I think there's a certain amount of rewriting history, well, in the central character anyway, because he wants to, come out smelling like a rose and feel like he doesn't have the level of responsibility that it turns out he really did.
That title is borrowed from a book about stories, and it made me curious about the novel, whether one of the themes is people desiring their lives to kind of have a certain shape and have closure and all that kind of stuff. Do you see that in there too?
Yes, I did, and it all gets blown out of the water when the central character receives a letter that doesn't quite make sense to him, and so that is the beginning of unraveling the mystery, and for him to come to terms with what actually happened and who he was back then. So it also plays with the idea of, are we now who we were then?
So John Locke says, our identity is constituted by our memory. Right. What makes me then the same person as me now is that I now remember doing the things that person did then. So memory connects these threads of my life into a whole, right? But there's also this thing that we all have to do, is narrate our lives.
Exactly.
As a unfolding life. It moves from the past into the present, into the future. And I tell my stories of what I have been, what I am becoming, what I anticipate becoming.
And what
memory plays
the ending is going to be, as in the title of the novel.
And memory plays a huge role in this self-narration.
And not just memory, but also the voices of other people. So I want to hear Rory on this. What did you feel when you had the revelation in Julian Barnes' A Sense of an Ending that things weren't the way that they seemed?
I had the sense from the beginning that the central character was not quite who he seemed. He tried to portray himself as, an average good guy,
right,
when in fact he was really a jerk.
Yeah.
So when someone points out your shortcomings and, things in your past that weren't so rosy, you have a choice to, be humble and accept it, or just be stubborn about it and say that it wasn't like that at all. For instance, he's alienated from his daughter, who really doesn't want to have a whole lot to do with him, and he manufactures an explanation for that, whereas when you read about it from the daughter's perspective, you understand that he's not a very nice person and he was a bit of a jerk.
So this novel, The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes, sounds like a very good read. You both think it's a very good read.
Gripping, absolutely.
It carries you along pretty clearly.
Okay.
And then it has kind of a blast at the end.
Okay, so Rory, thanks a lot for that recommendation.
This was great, and man, I can't agree with you strongly enough. This was a great pick.
Yes, thank you.
Let's hear from another one of our listeners. Carl in San Luis Obispo, welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So you got a summer reading recommendation for us, eh?
Yeah, I read not too long ago a book by the philosopher Tim Mulligan called Purpose in the Universe, which I wanted to recommend.
Tim Mulligan. He's a philosophy professor somewhere? I don't know Tim Mulligan.
I think St. Andrews, it said on the jacket.
And he's actually, he's biting the bullet, and he's proposing that the universe contains purpose, has purpose built into it?
He actually does. And well, okay, but that's not why I really like the book. The main reason I loved the book was that he sort of, gets involved in the naturalist theist debate. I guess that's the way philosophers would put it. I guess the more popular version is the atheist theist debate. And the thing that's so great about the book is that he very sympathetically portrays both positions in great detail. He goes through the ontological, the cosmological, teleological arguments, pro and con. He presents an alternative to both that he calls, let me see if I can say this, an anthropocentric purposivism.
An anthropocentric purposivism.
Right. Which is
easy for you to say.
It's basically a purpose in the universe that's non-human centric. So he basically tries to use the arguments of the theist to argue for there being a purpose, but then he sort of turns to the atheist to say, well, there's things like the problem of evil that basically are sort of showstoppers for theism, and so that there is a purpose, but it can't be human-centric.
It makes me think of that great line from Kafka, there is hope, but not for us.
Exactly. That. I mean, if there was a jacket blurb, you should have used that one.
So, is it different from Gnosticism? Obviously, I guess Gnosticism minus the sort of hidden God somewhere, because those guys thought, well, yeah, there is a very powerful being who created the world we're living in. It's just not necessarily a very competent or benevolent being. Is it a bit like that?
It's sort of like that, although I think it's the Gnostics were probably even a little bit more in the Christian camp, and maybe it was a grumpy God or something, But his idea, I think, is a little bit more abstract. And so, like for instance, what he's trying to argue is that some of these theological arguments, like why, in the modern form, are anthropocentric arguments about why are the constants of nature tuned just such that life exists, right? And so he's trying to say that, well, that's a pretty good indication that there's some purpose, because if you argue from the atheist position or the naturalist position, that just has to be a brute fact.
It sounds like he's kind of a 21st century Hume in a way. I mean,
Hume, he's skeptical, yeah.
Right. Hume argued against the design argument, but he didn't really reject it. He just kind of showed that if there is a designer, at most it shows that the designer is sort of half-baked designer, and not necessarily benevolent, not all that wise, So there might be a designer, but it's not the design. It's not the design argument won't give you the Christian God.
Well, so my take, and I'm sure Mulligan wouldn't endorse this because he's a serious philosopher, but I'm an old hippie, so. I was very influenced by Taoism as a young man, and this sounds to me a lot like what the Taoists were arguing. They were saying that there's some kind of structure in the universe, and it's better to be aligned with that than not, right? But not that it gives a damn about human beings, right?
Yeah, right.
It sounds kind of like that to me.
Right.
Purpose in the Universe by the philosopher Tim Mulligan.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you. This sounds maybe like a really hard, dense read, or is it an easy read?
Is it a beach book?
Is it a beach book?
Well, it's not really a beach book. It's really meant for philosophers, but I'm a non-philosopher, and I find it very valuable to slog through. So
yeah. So thanks a lot for joining us. Thanks for your recommendation.
Thank you for having me.
You can find all the books we've talked about on the show today, as well as many more suggestions from our listeners and guests, over at our community of thinkers at our website, philosophytalk.org.
Now, if you've only got a minute, then there's only one thinker worth reading this summer. It's Ian Scholl's The 60-Second Philosopher.
Ian Scholl. So I was at the book fair in Berkeley, California this June. Pretty crowded affair. Lots of booths from small presses, readings and interviews at locations scattered around downtown. Complicated and hip fast food, pear and ginger ices. Little tiny roller coasters for the kiddies. It was not musty. It did not reek of mildew. Beautiful sunny day. Good day to read a book at the beach, I guess, if you like to read books at beaches. I don't think I'd ever been to a book fair before. Used bookstores, secondhand shops, yes, and actual bookstores where I've actually purchased first-run hardcover books in my time. To make up for all the books I got for a quarter over the years, I did some research at the book fair. What kind of books are small presses hawking these days? Well, it was kids' books, food books, self-help, politics and business, fantasy, and eco-thrillers. Oh, and literary novels. One booth sold little tiny books that were either poetry or art you had to squint at. Also, weirdly, a couple booths that sold books that had been converted into clocks and notebooks. Books as decoration never quite appealed to me. But then again, I might have fallen into that trap by default because I'm so far behind on my reading, books are piling up like paper mountains. I have 3 shelves full of unread books, including biographies of Roald Dahl, Johnny Cash, Martin Short, P.G. Wodehouse, the singer Scott Walker, Memphis Minnie, Jane Jacobs, Malcolm X, Ian Fleming, the collected letters of Barbara Follett, whoever she was, plus the histories of Stax Records, Warner Brothers Studio, the collected novels of Samuel Beckett, read one, always meant to read the others, the novel after Wolf Hall, the big collection Rivals of Sherlock Holmes, which I just nabbed for 50 cents, the latest from Neil Stephenson, in hardcover, a new James Bond novel a friend gave me, 2 little books of Japanese poetry, a history of shipping, a book of old ghost stories, a Bomba Jungle Boy adventure, a Tom Swift adventure, the autobiography of Chester Himes, a history of Rome, a Joe Lansdale novel, a novel by Joe Gores, by David Goodis, by Sheridan Le Fanu, The latest Trunk of Worries from Naomi Klein, a biography of Rin Tin Tin, a biography of albino twins called True Vine. Oh, and The Three Musketeers, which I've seen but never read, 10 cents. And for 50 cents, a paperback Jack Reacher novel, which I had not read. I thought I'd read them all. I'm not even going to go into the comic books, except for the 3 Mexican Roy Rogers comics I got for $5, or ephemera, except to mention the tourist booklet from 1962 for Yuma, the Arizona Territorial Prison. It's called Hellhole. Well worth the $2 I paid. I read a story about a warden's wife who went on an escape by manning a Gatling gun. Why wasn't that made into a spaghetti western? Anyway, I was getting a haircut a couple days after the book fair. The stylist who cuts my hair also likes Jack Reacher novels, but she admitted she hadn't read the latest one. I told her I'd found I had not read yet, but I was reading something else first. She was astonished by that. She waits until she finishes a book before she buys a new one. Crikeys, I wish I'd thought of that. I swear I might get crushed in my sleep. Oh, did I mention my bedtime reading, Nabokov in America, How the Hippies Saved Physics, a biography of folk musicologist Alan Lomax, and The Mighty Wurlitzer, How the CIA Played America. All that, and the collected stories of Leonora Carrington, you know, the surrealist painter. Just got that one at the book fair. It's a slim volume. She didn't write much. So far I've read one story about a socialite who persuades a hyena to take her place at a dinner party. Good stuff. And right there you have the upside of buying books on a whim. I gotta go.
Philosophy Talk is a presentation of KALW, local public radio San Francisco, and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University, copyright 2017.
Our executive producers are David Demarest and Matt Martin.
Our senior producer is Devin Strolovich. Laura McGuire is our director of research. Cindy Prince-Baum is our director of marketing.
Thanks also to Merle Kessler, Audrey Dilling, and Colin Peden.
Support for Philosophy Talk comes from various groups at Stanford University and from the partners at our online community of thinkers.
The views expressed or misexpressed in this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our other funders, not even when they're true and reasonable.
The conversation continues on our website, philosophytalk.org, where you, too, can become a partner in our community of thinkers. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.
You're going to be wearing these cuffs on your way to prison.
Well, that is one magnificent prophecy, Mr. Reacher.